Hi, girls. Welcome to Wonder Woman Wednesdays. I'm delighted to introduce you to Dr. Upasana Agarwal, who's an associate professor in organizational behavior and human resource management at NITI. She is an MBA and a master's in labor law from Symbiosis, Pune, and she is a PhD from IIT Bombay. Upasana launched her academic career at SPJ about 10 years back after 7 years experience in a corporate career. I think she has lots of awards, which I shall talk about later. But let me first welcome her. Welcome, Upasana.
Thanks very much, Mandipji. It's a pleasure to connect with you and how grateful I am to have approached me.
I had to get somebody who was an academic and a researcher. And when I saw the areas that you work in, I mean, besides your focus being on leadership development, I was really impressed with the amount of work that you have done on women leadership and diversity, inclusion, communication, negotiations, and everything. And I want to tell all our members that you have not only, I mean, the number of awards you have got, but more recently, the fact that you're one of the three people picked up by Stanford University, published as the top 2% researchers who have made the maximum single year impact in the world. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
All right. So I wanted to begin with my favorite question, which I always ask, that what got you into the field of academics and research?
Well, very interesting question. And I think it's a very fundamental question of how I identify myself. So let me tell you a little about my background. My father was in the army. He served in the army for about 30 years. So I think right from the childhood, our upbringing, it was internalized that you have to do something beyond yourself. You have to contribute in life. And that was clear in our mind. And so my mom was a homemaker and she had this mantra of whatever you do it with perfection. Whatever you do, be very, very well recognized for it. So she was a homemaker, as I said, but she was a great gardener. So umpteen number of awards that she would have won in the armed forces for her gardening, for her cooking, for her dressing, and so on and so forth. So here was my father who said that go beyond home and make a difference. But here was my mother who said, make a difference with something that leaves an impact. And I think that's where my sense and drive for achievement began. My first few years of my life were spent in preparing for civil services. In fact, my choice of subjects, my graduation, everything was dovetailed to, fulfill that ambition because I wanted to be in the Indian Administrative Services and contribute there. Made it thrice till the interview, but couldn't qualify the final round. And I had to step out and consider another profession. Now, I had an alternative degree, which was management. So I went back to corporate and I served there for about 7 years. But, the experience of delving deep into a phenomena, which is something which the civil services preparation gave me, drew me automatically to the field of academia because I wanted to have my pauses, think deeper and investigate a phenomena before I commented on one. And as we would accept, corporate world doesn't have so much of time. You have to take
Not always, yes.
Not always. I agree. And that's what pretty got me into the PhD field. And I started teaching at SPJ. And I realized I now know my calling. And I now know the purpose. So I was getting to do two things. I was getting to teach and connect with students. So lots of mentoring happening. And it also gave me a lot of time to delve deeper into research and start getting to understand a phenomena better. So I guess that's the background. And that's how I am into academia today. So it's been good 11 years that I have been teaching. Yes.
I really think you know more better now that you've been researching this, that when I listen to the backgrounds of how much our parents had, the way they have shaped us and how there are a lot of women who come from families where they haven't had that initial push. And I think we're very blessed that we have had parents like that. Absolutely. I was reading a lot of your papers and I was very impressed with the research and the key insights that you have regarding the factors affecting career advancements of Indian women managers. I think this has been a thing that you've been working on last few years, and I was very excited to read. So I wanted you to dwell upon and share with our members into some of the questions that you kind of probed through this research. One was that how do you think that women managers explain their changing career aspirations now?
Right.
Two was about, how, to what extent do they, their career paths reflect how, in respect to their own self and social identity. That is something that you have probed. And then, in what ways does the quality of a woman manager's relationship with her supervisor actually influence her career growth? These are things, whenever we kind of look at the attrition levels in organizations, we always try to calculate what are the things which hold women back. And in your research, you seem to have captured each one of them. So I would really, in detail, if you can, explain each of these aspects. I think it would be marvelous.
Thank you for that question, Mandeep. And let me share with you what have we done in terms of research on women managers in India. Now, you see, traditionally, when we looked up the literature to find out what are some of the factors that impact career of a women manager in India, we realized everybody was talking about what's not working. Home not working, spouse not supporting, supervisor not good, etc., etc., etc. And we didn't want to find out what was not working. We wanted to find out what works. And therefore, our target population had to be women who had done very well for themselves, are still doing one. And we call this sustained careers. It's a research term which says career sustainability. So we wanted to find out women who had sustained their careers, and we met women who were in senior management. So they had gone through the career stages and also life stages, and wise enough to reflect back and answer some of our research questions. We used a very objective measure called health, happiness, and productivity. That's the HHP, to identify whether the sample fits into what we call as sustained career of the women manager. So we asked these women to tell us a little about how have they done in terms of their career, their performance, objective and subjective measures. We also asked them whether they were happy with life, were they content, and we asked them about their health indices, such as if there were some physical issues that they were going through, and how was their mental health. So this was the objective data that we took. And we drew up a set of sample of population who we investigated. Interestingly, the one factor which seems to make a lot of difference to a woman's career today is her career intentionality. And what does this mean?
Fantastic.
This means how intended are we to have a career? How much of myself do I define with the career that I have? Is career a matter of either or is it about an and of life? And we realized all these women had very strong career intentionality. Their self was defined with career along with family in most cases. Step next was, so what's the next best explanation of these women who have done so well? And the answer was their growth mindset. All of these women who we identified as having sustained career had a very strong growth mindset. And how do you define that? These were people who had accepted that there's nothing casted in die in gold. There is nothing that they can't do. There is nothing that they cannot change. And so this bit of research gave us two very critical inputs. One was career intentionality. Two is having a growth mindset. These two were the trigger points for women who are doing well today in the Indian corporate. I think to a large extent, we can make that pronouncement with some amount of certainty.
Terrific. Yeah.
Going further,
I really love this because a lot of time I think people look at everything else, but the fact that they really are, a little bit ambition about growing and also the intentionality. But please go on.
Our next question was, why do women differ? Why do some of us have a career intentionality and have a growth mindset, others don't? And that's when we discovered the 6 M's, which impact a woman's career sustainability. And let me take you through what are these 6 antecedents or M's which impact the career intentionality and sustainability of a woman manager. The first is the mother or the grandmother or the maid. Second M is the menstruation time. That's the adolescence. The third M is her own motherhood. The fourth is marriage, spouse. The fifth is the mother-in-law. And the sixth is her set of mentors.
Wow.
And these are the 6 factors which interplay and have an impact on a woman's career intentionality? Intentionality is one, but are you able to sustain?
Yeah.
And we need these factors. We need a majority of these factors to sustain the career. I'm not saying all 6 of them, but that's what emerged, that there was a good percentage of most of these. So I think I would say a rough estimate would be maybe of the 6 factors, most of them had 4 factors, any 4 of them.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So if you would want to know a little more about this research and how it played a role, and I can just go further on it.
Yes, please do. Little bit about each one.
A little bit about each one. The primary caregiver, which happened to be in most cases the mother in Indian households, who was she? What was her definition of life? What value systems did she carry made a huge impact on the girl's mindset, on what we call as self-construal. How do you construe yourself? And psychologically, we talk about the self-concept and others' concept. But who are you is a definition which is not necessarily only given to us by ourselves. It's something that the environment has to impact us. We came across this lady who was very, very, very well recognized and ambitious, but doing very well banker. Now, this lady shared with us how she came from a humble beginning, but how her mother would struggle. She had started a parlor of her own. She learned all the tricks of the trade. She was managing 3 kids, running the parlor, trying to give a good life to the family. She said that streak of learning, that learning orientation, that agility, never say die attitude, you can make a difference to the quality of life. She said, I learned from there. And she said, much later in my life, I wanted to do an MBA. And I realized there's no need to have an ambition which you can't fulfill. She said, much later in my life, I went to INSEAD while I had my 2nd kid.
Sure.
And I completed it. That's just one example of what a mother can do to somebody's life. Menstruation, that's a stage 2, or what we also call adolescence, a very career defining and identity defining phase of any woman's life. What happened in the school? Who did you meet? What were your circle of friends? What did they talk to you? That, and also in some sense, this is also networking, the social capital that happened. Who were your teachers? What were their conversations with you? That made a lot of difference. In fact, in one study, a lady told us that, she was body shamed while she was in the college, in the adolescence, and boys would make remarks for her. She said, a lot of my time went in trying to get an understanding of right food, right exercise, right grooming. And today she's heading the media industry. She said somewhere that deficiency or those challenging moments actually turned out to be my sources of strength and my areas of strength and perfection. And I chose this and made this as my profession. And since she's worked on her strengths, today she's the best. Now that's what an adolescence can do to a career of a woman.
Sure.
The third and a very defining feature is motherhood. And I think majority of us in India would say that that's the time we call it a day. Sometimes or we take break or we look out for flexibility. Yes, very tough time if one doesn't have support system. But how did you play around with being a mother and being a professional? And I would probably want to even say that that's a make or break time.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody hung up their boots then, of the limited sample that we studied, I think they hung it up for a long time, unless some support mechanism came in or stepped in later to support them. So motherhood, the whole culture of India, which is where, the phenomenon of mother is very gendered. I mean, caring has to be a woman-driven initiative, and family may not necessarily, you have an option. So I think that became a very critical part again. How did you manage motherhood? What did you go through? The fourth is marriage and spousal value system. What does your husband think about your work? Are you a value creator or in the house, or there is no value for the money that you want? How is your profession seen? That made a huge difference to a value system between a husband and a wife. Was it traditional, which means, well, you got to manage the kitchen and the boardroom, or we'll manage the boardroom and the kitchen together? I think that immensely influenced a woman's career sustainability. Even if she willed, many times she had to give up because there was no support coming in from the husband or the family. Mother-in-law in most cases, and that's interesting, Mandeepji, because that's what we're realizing. The mother-in-laws today are realizing the value of a working daughter-in-law. There's lots of respect that we saw that many of our respondents shared their mother-in-law had for the daughter-in-law's profession. And that subtly influenced the dynamics between the husband and the wife also. When you had a very supportive mother-in-law, she influences the son, and that makes a difference. And many times she stepped in to take care of the girl's career. In fact, we've had cases where mother-in-law has moved out from her place of origin to be with the family in support during especially the maternity. And the final and the most important was the mentors. Also what we call as the personal board of directors. Who in your life was the energizer? Who are set of those people who you turned back for emotional and instrumental support? Did you have? And all of these women, that when we spoke to them, they could just draw out networks of personal relationship, networks of professional relationships. And these were people who gave them the right nurturance, right information, and right connection. And I think that's how I would like to summarize. These 6 factors had huge impact on where women were today.
Upasana, I think all the women that we have, and we have really a very wonderful group of women, talented women, as I always say, from banking to IT to lots of industries. I'm sure we all are able to relate with this and are doing this check about how many of these things actually shape the way we do. We often talk about it, but I'm glad that you took the time to put these all together in your research. And I think that's fabulous. So, Upasana, very related to this study is also when you are talking about the quality of a woman manager's relationship with a supervisor, how it influences her career. This is something we have all seen it at work, and various studies talk about it. But I would like to know, what were your insights into this?
Sure. I think, as you rightly pointed out, Mandeepji, that supervisor plays an extremely important role because the kind of time we spent in organizations. The presence makes a difference, both in terms of minute-to-minute interaction, also in terms of the knowledge one has about processes, systems, opportunities, and I think a supervisor can make a lot of difference. In fact, I was just discussing it with somebody. A famous story of koi fish comes to my mind. In fact, it's a phenomena. It's called the koi phenomena. I'll briefly tell you what it is, and I think that's the role a manager plays and can play in anybody's life. Koi is a fish which is very well regarded and respected in the Buddhist culture. And this is a fish which is found in the Indian Ocean and the Chinese Sea and so on. And Chinese and Japanese respect the fish as very holy. Now, koi fish has an interesting reality to it. You put the koi fish into a small tumbler, it can grow up to a few millimeters. Put that same koi fish into a bigger tumbler or a bottle, you would see the size expands.
Wow.
Put it into an aquarium, the same koi fish will grow to a couple of, maybe meters.
Wow.
And you put it in an ocean, it'll get to a couple of 100 meters. Same koi fish. The container can make so much of a difference.
Wow.
For the career of any one of us, our supervisors, our mentors are that container. So if we are contained with people who have a very big mindset, who work on the phenomena of abundance in life, I think that rubs. Because such people not only create one for themselves, they create it for people around them.
Yes.
I'm sure you can relate to this.
Oh my God, I say this all the time, Upasana, that, there is such a lack of advocacy and corporate sponsorship for women. At least we came in an era, perhaps. I think it's changing because I have interviewed a lot of women who have 2+ decades of experience, and they always end up saying, I didn't have any mentors. And now the girls who are coming in, because all corporates are trying to also say that they can retain the women, their mentoring is a common thing.
Formalizing.
But at the time, anyway, it brings me to another research of yours, from the women's thing, which has always fascinated me. And when I read it, I had to touch upon it, is on workplace bullying. Right. This is something, and there are a lot of related aspects to it, whether it is workplace engagement, whether it is how, in Indian corporate, it is prevalent, and how the psychological contract itself and the bystander reactions is that mujhe koi farak nahi padta, this is happening and let it happen. So, and who are the sources who talk about it or who bring it up and who don't? So I really have myself written a little bit about it in the corporate experience that I have had, but I want to know from your research experience, what have been your findings?
Sure. So a lot of my research has been triggered because I somewhere was either an observer or a victim of it. Whether it's about women advancement, women career sustainability, or bullying, or organizational politics, or psychological contracts, I would have gone through a phenomena. Very early part of my career, I was given to understand that if you want to be passionate about anything, you better have experienced it yourself than to be very bookish about it. So I knew what bullying means, and I knew what disrespect in any domain, whether it's corporate or home, meant. So we wanted to understand that what happens when one is disrespected at workspace. And this was it could be any workspace, as I said, it could be a corporate, or it could be academia, or it could be home, but we chose corporate for the study. And the first question was, do we even understand what is bullying? And why did I ask this question is because we realized that cross-culturally, the understanding and acceptance of bullying is very different, Mandeep.
Exactly. When I worked overseas, it was like, oh my God, there are laws about these
it's zero tolerance policy.
Exactly.
But here we would be like, he's your senior, yeah, it's okay. Bade hain aapse, she's senior. Let it be. Watch out. You have your appraisal coming. Stuff like that. So I wanted to first be very sure that do we have the same understanding and acceptance of bullying in India as in the West? Well, what turned out is this: yes, we do understand that what is bullying. We did a qualitative study to find out from people, what do you understand by bullying? Have you experienced this? How did you react? And so on. And it was a very fascinating study. And the definition of bullying is same, but the threshold of acceptance is different, Mandeep. So just to say, if 3 incidences in a Western part of the world would result in filing a sexual harassment case, just an example, or a bullying case in organizations, in India, it may take 25 or 30. We will keep taking it, and we take a long time to say, hey, listen, that's not happening, because this is absolutely demeaning and disrespectful, and I don't think I would like to continue. So the acceptance level of bullying is very high. This is also explained by the patriarchal system that we are a part of. Patriarchy, but also collectivism. It's all right. Don't be a rubble bruiser. Don't be somebody who makes so much of noise. You need to come across as a harmonizer. That's a beautiful quality. But in what context are we talking about? So we wanted to find out the impact of what happens when bullying takes place. Amongst other things, the most interesting one is that the implication it has on the individual. We realized a lot of people who shared that they were bullied, their first reaction was self-blame and self-shame. Many of them shared that, we would hold ourselves back. And this is agender, wherein we met women and men, so I'm not making any specific comments about men or women. They said, we don't speak up. We just don't go back. Because I think I'm overreacting. I think I'm a narcissist. I think I am somebody with huge sense of pride. So there's something wrong with me, till something very interesting happened. And the role of workplace friendship. So I step up and I speak to my friends and I say, whenever I go to my boss's cabin, this is what is happening. And they say, hey, listen, that's not okay. And from self-blame starts the other blame, and so on and so forth. So the point I'm trying to make is thresholds are long. It starts with self-blame. One can only imagine an organization, the kind of organizational time, resources, and the individual loss that we are having when something like this happens. So that was one part of it. We wanted to find out what do bystanders do. By and large, they would be on a mute zone. Because again, there is this bystander apathy. Unless you are someone in the organization, you would not like to meddle. Unless, some 1 or 2 people step in and then others join this as a group and a team, and the crowd, there's wisdom of crowd that begins to come in. But the first initial responses to incidents of bullying are usually overlooked. And that was serious, because we realized a lot of them quit their jobs. We then wanted to find out what are the implications if you don't quit the job, because that's not so easy. You might need to have another job before you quit it. What impacted? Many of them said we stopped talking. I mean, even if I know there is something going wrong in a particular function, and I'm aware of it, I will keep quiet. I'll hold that information back. Why would I care for an organization where I'm demeaned so much, where I'm disrespected so much? Trust in the supervisor goes away. creativity suffers, people don't voice their concerns, and ultimately there's turnover intentions, which means over a period of time, the person might quit the organization, person is on a lookout. We wanted to find out if it impacts the bystander. Yes, it does. People who are watching what's happening also get impacted passively. It's like passive smoking. But it's having a deep impact on those who are watching it, because they're saying, hey, listen, today it's he, tomorrow it could be me. So how long am I going to continue with it? Let's go to a place which is more dignified and respectful to my talent and to me as a human being. So strong reactions, strong implications of bullying. Did culture make a difference? Yes. Only to the extent that we would hold ourselves back till we reacted. But when we reacted, the impact of the reaction of the employee is huge. Is huge. And leaves a very strong negative brand for the leader and the organization. Because today you see Glassdoors or anybody, anywhere else, people are talking about what's happening in what organization. It's a transparent, democratic world. So...
No, I also think that it percolates, because if they see that people are indulging in this kind of behavior and it's all right, and it is in the name of productivity or numbers or something like that, because it's patriarchal, then it percolates down and everybody down the line thinks it's all right to behave like that. And then there are the bystanders who realize that if they see victims of people who have tried to bring up something and getting ambushed completely, that is the word in my dictionary, getting ambushed totally into something like that, then they never take the courage and bring such things up. And there is a passive aggression things which build up in the organization, which could be seen in a very martial thing. And that's why it can be very difficult for women sometimes to survive in a thing. They can be tough to take it. They're very good in their own sphere of control, but it goes on. And this is, as I promised you over coffee, we have to talk about a lot of my own personal research and things on this, but this is a thing to worry about. But I'm very happy that today I see the difference, because I was overseas for a decade. And as you said, that from school level onwards, there was no tolerance on bullying. I see a difference which is happening because people like you and I, our kids are going to school, and we would like to know who are the teachers who are letting such things go by and are ignoring it. So we want to bring it up. And as parents are getting more educated and aware about such issues, I think the children are bringing it up and so on and so forth. So I am very glad that in some ways things are changing around and so much is getting written about. And let's not miss the fact that today there's social media. There is a lot of people who end up putting things like that. And I think, the people who are into it or indulgent. That's right. That is, it goes a long way. When I read your resume and I see the kind of work that you have done in SMEs and MSMEs and corporates, non-for-profit, I see that besides the research work, your teaching assignments, and then you've been an active member of many management associations. So which is your favorite role? Teaching, researching, or being in one of these, as a corporate trainer? Which is your key passion?
Right. I think they're all interwoven, but once a teacher, always a teacher. What deeply sort of nourishes me is conversations. Whether the conversations are with my set of students in the business school, or they are with participants during a training session, or the one that you and I are having just now. Deep conversations and rich conversation nourish me. And I think I'm primarily somebody who would say it's not so much about teaching, but it's co-learning. That excites me. Even back in organizations, while research is a passion, I am gradually working on action research, which means a problem defined by an organization, not necessarily defined by journal papers. One of the reasons to work now in among women entrepreneurs, and that's what I am now currently working, and women in management, has been because there's been a lot of conversations that have taken place, and that's excited me to understand what is their world, what are their experiences, and bring that back into my classrooms for teaching and bring it up for research.
One of the things which an area that I have been working on with my professor who I'm meeting here when I'm in the Atlanta Business School is Professor Linda Drayton, and I've been thanks to her, I've been in the area of future of work. And I just wanted to tell you that, after research comes the fact that you need to tell the right organization, if you have a consortium, that they implement this research, like diversity and inclusion. What is coming out of all this research? So much gets published. But I do not see, and this is something Linda used to say, that Mandeep, there are very few, HR people like you, she used to say that you can take this strategy and put it back in an organization. Because the good part is only when the organizations become aware about what this wonderful research that you are doing, will changes start happening organizationally.
You play a very important role, because I think this is exactly what's missing, especially in Indian academia, is that industry and academia are not talking to each other. And I was so happy to hear about this group and, to be part of it, because we are into our different worlds. Industry is experiencing it every day, doesn't have time or energy to reflect back. We are doing our own research, which goes where we do not know. And we need to come back together on a platform and talk about it and talk about the next steps. I completely echo what you're saying. There is no meaning of an experience or a research unless it results into some strategic changes in one's own life or in the organization. So I'm so happy in any capacity that I can support you to be a part of such conversations and take it to the next purposeful level.
As this thing in your own life, out of all the 6 things that you talked about, this is a little personal. Which are the things which played a very important role in you being what you are today?
Motherhood. I'll tell you why. Because you see, as I was saying, and again, getting back to where we spoke about the research and so on, saying that, very high degree of career intentionality was something that my father had already, ingrained in our brains, both me and my brother. Motherhood was a real challenge, because here I had a daughter who I had to raise up with my husband, who's a banker and has very, very hectic routine. And I had a PhD to finish. I think it really took the test of my wits and me to put my theory into practice. And that also shaped me. And I recall and I'll just sort of take a couple of seconds to talk to you about this famous example of a torpedo. My father used to give. He used to say, learn from a torpedo. A torpedo is set at an object, but interestingly, it never goes linear and straight. It keeps calibrating and changing its direction depending on where the object moves. So he used to say, the nature of your problems will change. The problems will always remain. So develop what it takes for you to develop. Learn what it takes for you to learn. But don't you let yourself get off from the mission of your life, the object of your life, which is whatever it is. And I think that was something that was put to real test during my motherhood stage. I think those 10 years were not easy, till the girl grew up to be on her own.
My final question, Upasana, is what is your success mantra? And what is your one good advice to the women members of WIP?
Success mantra, have a high say-do ratio. Take challenges and complete those challenges. There will be deterrents, but fall down, get up, start working. Never say die. Never say have a killing spirit and have a fire in the belly always. Let there be passion and let there be a lot of energy, both physically and mentally. And I think that for me, that's been the mantra. Passion, drive, the need to make an impact and learn in the process.
Professor Upasana Agarwal, you're amazing. It's so good to know. And I really wish you all the best with your future, because you may be modest to say that you're not successful, but I think your research is making more difference than you think you are. And we are very happy to have you in WIP, because here, I think we need to do research, because we have 300 women here itself, and we have a lot of, wonderful conversations happening. And I'm amazed. Each story touches me every time that I, interview people or they just speak to people, and the conversations they're having every day on different themes. So it's lovely to have you. All the things that you have shared with us, and I'm really going to give the link of your some of your papers and stuff. I think if you can share with us, it would be very nice for our members to go and read into the details of the research you have. All the very best, Upasana. Lovely to host you today.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It's been a pleasure to be here. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.